Grey Slayers and 30k? What the beep? Time for a wolf waffle. Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, the first in a new series, a waffle, a chat about Space Wolves. So this is just a chilled out video, just a chit chat about certain topics. And today's topic is going to be about Grey Slayers, which have just been introduced to Space Wolves in 30k. So I have my cup of coffee here. I'm going to have a quick sip and then we'll get talking. Okay, so to be honest with you, I don't know which direction this video is going to go, this little chit chat, but I thought it was quite a nice topic to start out with because I can talk about what I want to talk about, and whilst doing so, probably introduce you into my Space Wolves experience, stroke history, etc., and where I am with my army. So recently, Sam from Emperor's Path did a update on his Space Wolves, his 30k Space Wolves, and he was talking about Grey Slayers being introduced into 30k. Now, first of all, if you haven't checked out Sam's channel from Emperor's Path, go and check it out. He's a huge Space Wolves player. He plays 30k and 40k Space Wolves, so well worth checking out. And whilst you're there, I'll throw a link down to Mythos, his channel from Frost and Fists, huge wolf brother, and also to Kuja Hyra, who's also painting up his Space Wolves armies at the moment. He's got painting tutorials, so go and check him out. Right, okay. So yeah, Sam mentioned that Grey Slayers were coming into 30k, and it was going to affect how his army was going to work with the Grey Hunters, etc. Now, I know Grey Slayers because my Space Wolves are 13th Company Space Wolves, and I got my army from the Eye of Terror. So I started my army when this book came out. At the time, I was just playing Necrons. My buddy was heavily into Chaos, and he was playing Emperor's Children. Now, this was back in the tail end of 3rd edition, where Assault was king, where you could sort of kill a unit off and consolidate into another unit, carry on the assault. And I had a tough time against that particular army with my Necrons. Excuse me. And my second army, when it came to time to choosing a second army, I decided to go for Space Wolves because I wanted to experience close combat for myself. And when I saw this one come out, my buddy who was doing Emperor's Children did The Lost and Damned, which is from this book, and I saw this picture right there. This really appealed to me, A, because you had wolf Space Marines, B, you had actual wolves, which appealed to my Xenos side of me, and C, there's a lot of conversion capabilities with this, and I hadn't done a single conversion at this time on my Necrons, so I was really up for that as well. Now, incidentally, the 13th Company, if you don't know it, have no vehicles in their army. They have bikes, but no vehicles. Excuse me, a frog in my throat. Which was a bit ironic considering that my first army only had a monolith, and then I had no vehicles in this one. And even more ironic is that my third army was Tyranids, who had no vehicles. So my first 3 armies, I had 1 tank. But anyway, yeah, and the difference basically between the 13th Company and the normal Space Wolves Codex was that you had some extra rules basically. So the whole army, apart from the bikes, could scout, so you could move forward, scout 6 inches, which is really great. And then rather than having the Mark of Wolven just on one model, you could have it on the whole squad, I believe. God, man, it's a long time since I saw the rules. Forget that anyway, the rules are irrelevant now. So, They had basically some special rules which obviously affected the army and made the army work. It was a very expensive army. I mean, in those days, the Long Fangs units, which was the only heavy support in here, were 250 points for 4 las cannons and a pack leader, so they were pretty expensive. Now, that was fine. I had a lot of fun with the army. I have to admit, I did well against certain armies and not so well against other armies. But on the whole, you know, it was a nice army. And one unit, of course, that was in this particular army, which you couldn't get in the normal Space Wolves codec, was a Wolven. We're not talking about Wolven in this game, but yeah, the Wolven were in there. They had the option to move and then also do an extra D6 movement, which is quite nice. They were uncontrolled, so I had to go to the nearest target unless you had a certain character in there. But anyway, forget the Wolven. My troops choice in this codex were called Grey Slayers. And they had special rules, extra, you know, special rules from just normal Grey Hunters. In particular, they had a bolt pistol and a bolt gun. And they had a close combat weapon, and they had a special rule called True Grit, which is no longer around, but basically that allowed you to have +1 attack because you could hold a bolt gun and a bolt pistol and a close combat weapon. Everyone has that nowadays, but at the time it was a benefit. So like I said, Sam has mentioned that Grey Slayers are now in 30k. And sort of brought back some sour memories of my army, because I was playing this army obviously for quite some time, and then they introduced a brand new Space Wolves codex. I was pumped for this codex. I was sure that the 13th company would be in there, but they weren't, and the new codex made this codex defunct, made my army defunct. I was painting my army at the time. I had the Wolven on my desk. I just started painting them, yeah, I got really disheartened. I stopped painting them. I moved on to something else, and I put the army away in the case. Now gradually I got over that, and I decided to use my Space Wolves as normal Space Wolves instead. So I went out, I bought a few rhinos, and I started playing them as standard Space Wolves rather than my 13th company, which was fine. You know, I felt disappointed, but it still worked, and I continued that way until I started painting them. So I started painting them a couple of years ago, and I've been trying to paint them to my to the highest standard that I can. And during this process of painting them, a few things has happened. Mainly this: Curse of the Wolfen, and in there, my unit, the Wolven models, the Wolven unit in here. Of course, only for normal Space Wolves, not for a 13th company. So it does mean that I can then go back to using a 13th company themed army, and in actual fact I'm feeling a bit more positive now about that, because I think I can select units from the standard rulebook. Now I've got Wolven, great, I can use those. At one point my Wolven models, I've got 23 of them, I was going to use as Blood Claws, but now I can actually use them as Wolven. So I've got my Wolven. I'm going to use Thunderwolf Cavalry because I think that's very themey. I think that works with the army quite well. Of course I'm just going to basically take Long Fangs as my heavy support, and I'm just going to keep to this original sort of idea as much as I can, and the army is going to be very fluffy. Not going to be that great on the table, but it's going to be fluffy. Once I've completely painted all of the army that I had originally, I will then add some extra stuff to it so I can play them as normal Space Wolves as well. So I can have the fluffy Space Wolves, or I can just play normal Space Wolves. So I will buy some drop pods, etc. For them and move them forward. But of course the title here is about Grey Slayers in 30k. So yeah, they're in 30k now, and it begs me to ask, where is my Space Wolves 13th Company supplement? Where is my 13th Company army? Has my 13th Company army been moved to 30k, which sort of makes sense? My army, 10,000 years in the past. They're wearing pre-heresy armour. They were locked in the Eye of Terror, 10,000 years. They've come out of the Eye of Terror in this book, still wearing their pre-heresy armour, and because they've been locked in the Eye of Terror, that's one reason why they have no vehicles. All their vehicles are broken down, and that's another reason why they're wearing chaos armour, because as their armour is broken, they've had to replace them with the fallen foes armour. So they've got chaos bits and pieces on their armour. So arguably they could be a 30k army, they could be a 40k army, and that sounds great, doesn't it? That sounds ideal. So now my Space Wolves, I can use them as 30k and I can use them as 40k. And I need to find out some more information about this, and maybe this is where you guys can help me, because I've been chatting with a couple of people, and I've been told that you play 30k with your normal army, your normal rules, but the missions are different. So I can just play normal 40k but with 30k missions. But then I've also been watching Sam's video. He's talking about all the weapon options are different as well. Now all of my guys are magnetised, but they're magnetised with plasma and melter. I haven't magnetised them with flamers, because for me, Space Wolves are not flamer orientated. I leave that to the Blood Angels. So it's melter and plasma on mine. But I believe those aren't weapon options in 30k. So I don't want to have to start messing around with the models that I've already painted to try and make them 30k friendly. So I'd appreciate feedback on that actually. How do I go about using my army in 30k and 40k, because that certainly is an option, and if that is doable, which probably is to a certain extent, then maybe that's a good solution for my quandary of where the 13th Company sit in this universe of ours. Yeah, so let me know what you think. As I said, just a bit of an introduction into this Wolf Waffle. We're going to talk about some more topics in the future. Hopefully now you've got a little bit more of a background of where I'm coming from. Yeah, we'll see you in the next video.